This video is sponsored by OneFootball. OneFootball's app makes it easy to keep up to date with transfer news, scores and stats all in the one place. To download the OneFootball app, click the link in the description. The app is free.
Blues benefits from home atmosphere to break top six curse. I haven't been able to do a couple of these videos in the last few weeks, and really it's been one of, well, beginning with Newcastle and then going on to the last few games, one of the best periods we've seen, maybe 2013-14 in Martinez's first season. You know, just to say briefly about the Chelsea win and the performance against West Ham last week, coming off the back of that Newcastle win, it's been absolutely amazing. And we'll go on to much more detail about the game yesterday at home against Arsenal, but the difference that the crowd is making in Goodison to the team and the performances that we're seeing the team put in against the so-called top six, it's been absolutely amazing. Really, really has. Looking at this game in particular though, in the lineup, obviously not too much to change. After what could have been 4 or 5-0 against West Ham away from home last week, but obviously there was that last minute change of Jagielka coming in for Keane, who'd been carrying a virus, didn't feel too well in the warm up, so it was a slight change there. But the team unchanged. You know, just looking at that briefly, Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been absolutely amazing for us in the last few weeks, leading the top of the line, usually top of the list in terms of work rate. So even, you know, since Newcastle in particular, Bernard and Richarlison really working well as a partnership on the wings. Richarlison, I think, suiting that right hand side. Bernard's just looking the classiest player on the pitch the last few weeks. Sigurdsson had an amazing game, had an absolutely amazing game against Arsenal, and I think he's really turned things around and being the creative player in midfield that we need to support Dominic Calvert-Lewin and to support those two wingers. Gomez and Ghana, again, Gomez turning in the, you know, not to behemoth anything the way we talked about Snyderland and when he really started to play for us, but he just looks like a Rolls Royce of a midfielder. He looks absolutely amazing in midfield, dictating the play, able to take the sting out of the game or able to get forward in an attacking sense. And Ghana, like we know him to be, somebody that can break up anybody's play, any team's play. And he's been doing it since the failed move to PSG in January. You know, he's there to show other clubs that he's how good he is come the summer. But, you know, he hasn't left his responsibilities at Everton despite having a failed move there. Jagielka coming in from his third start of the season. Obviously, last time we would have seen him properly, I think there was a couple. I'm trying to think what the middle game would have been. But obviously played Wolves that opening day. You know, not necessarily a great performance at that start of the season, but how brilliant was he for us yesterday? Zuma as well has looked absolutely brilliant, keeping 3 clean sheets in the last 3 games. Digne, the most consistent player in the Premier League, as we know statistically, but as fans watching him week in, week out, we know the quality that he possesses going forward defensively as well. Coleman back to some of his best Everton form, despite having a really shaky season, I would say, under Marco Silva's first. And Pickford coming back from the controversy last weekend, ultimately putting in a good performance. He didn't have too much to do during the game, as we all know, but when he was needed at the start of that second half, he was there to be found and block those stops. In terms of Arsenal before the game, you know, there was no Ramsey, there was no Aubameyang, 2 of their best players this season, and I think for Everton fans would say 2 most dangerous players they were glad not to see on that starting lineup. We could all see early on that Arsenal weren't up for it. You know, similar of Wenger, Arsenal teams gone by didn't really fancy a Sunday game against a team that were going to work hard, going to push them, and you know, we haven't done that too often, especially against Arsenal, but against all those top six teams, you know, giving them a little bit, throwing a little bit of work in, seeing what the defence is really like, and especially when they go out of 3 at the back like they had. Dominic Calvert-Lewin was a handful for them straight off the bat. You know, it was same as that 2-0 win over West Ham. There wasn't too much you were going to do about that team. Ghana, as we've said, was just breaking up the play from first doors. And for me, Sigurdsson and Gomez really dictating the play going forward. Gomez able to take that ball up and play with it and use his, as Darren Fletcher said on Match of the Day that night, his size, his stature. He really uses his body against other players, and you know, he can keep that ball up so well. But beyond that, though, you know, we've seen a lot of players that can hold the ball up well in the middle of the park over the last 3 years in the style of football that we've played under 4 managers. I think Gomez is able to get forward in a way that maybe we hadn't seen too often since Ross Barkley left the club. That drive and run forward. You know, we've seen in both derbies, he came close to scoring, so close to scoring in the first at Anfield, but you know how important he was for us in that second game too. And in terms of these, you know, 3 home fixtures that we've been absolutely amazing in, starting with a draw against Liverpool, he's been one of the most important players in the pitch for us. Sigurdsson, who I think I've been tough on at times this season before that Newcastle game when looking at games. You know, I heard a statistic yesterday that he had more shots on target. I think it was 9 at the time the match hadn't even finished. I'd just seen it on my Twitter feed than nearly all other Premier League players this season. It just really goes to show you how much he does for us. You know, there's a couple of Toffee TV videos and stuff I'd seen yesterday, or player ratings that, you know, in a similar way to me, it hadn't been quite to the level if he was a bit more involved, if he had got the goal. But really for me, he was unlucky not to score. He was really unlucky not to score to make it 2-0 towards the end. There was a couple of chances that he had. You know, we could say maybe that's not clinical enough necessarily, having that number of shots on goal. He needs to score a goal for that. But the way that he got forward and the way that him and Gomez dictated the play going forward, I thought was absolutely brilliant from the off. Dominic Calvert-Lewin deserves the credit, I think, as much as Jagielka for that goal. You know, I'm sure we've all watched it a couple of times now. We have the Digne throw-in, which was absolutely incredible, and a few people hemming in hand on Twitter and then match today over whether it was a legal move or not. Almost like a FIFA 19 player, the way he throws that ball in, absolutely amazing. Dominic Calvert-Lewin gets ahead of it. Not sure he gets the first touch of it when it comes in the box, but he's certainly the one that directs it towards Jagielka. And really, it summed up that first 10 minutes for me. The way Dominic Calvert-Lewin had been feet above every other player physically on the pitch when he'd been jumping for the ball. The way he'd wrestle players off and the way he was able to hold that ball up. You know, you can see the confidence beaming out of him, and he's been so close to being our man of the match every week for the last few weeks, particularly against these big teams at home. Chelsea 2 weeks ago, West Ham last week. He's been such an important player for us, and how could you not give the credit to Jagielka coming in for only his 3rd start this year? I thought it was interesting, the goal itself, his positioning as the throw-in was taken. I think it shows you a little bit about how set pieces are being worked in a way that a manager a few ago wouldn't have done. Jagielka, with his age and pace, obviously, he's sitting on that very back line waiting for the ball to come in, and it's perfect. It's so advantageous that it gets a goal for us. Really pleased for him, as I'm sure every Everton fan was, to be called up at last minute. As he said himself, not usually the match winner, never mind the goal scorer in general when he came on. So I think everybody was thrilled for it, and it was amazing just to get that first goal to make so much of our dominance in the first 10 minutes. I mean, we all seen that Arsenal just weren't up for it. With Ramsey and Aubameyang not in the team, they weren't driving forward, they weren't collecting balls, they were losing it too easily in midfield. You know, there was far more desire, as they said on Match Today as well last night. You know, there was so much more from us in that first 10 minutes, and we were given a reward. I think we were all glad to see that it was Jagielka that scored it. Digne's passing again, and in the 20 minutes that followed that goal, I just thought was absolutely incredible. Whether it be in his position along the back 4, and he's able to cross it up to Richarlison, as we've seen him do a couple of times. Whether it's from the left wing, and he's crossing it into the box, his passing is absolutely incredible. And I think people early on the season were maybe a little bit critical of his play defensively. I think he's showing us now with the last few clean sheets what he can do for us. In the same mould as Leighton Baines, has been an incredible attacking left back, but also resolute when we need him there. We were defensively solid simply for the rest of that first half. They had a few chances, but nothing really. You know, like we said and heard, that Pickford didn't really have too much to do until that second half at all. So we just made most of that dominance completely. Breaking so quickly, the pace that we'd not been used to seeing, certainly this time last year under Sam Allardyce. It was generally last season, even at the start of Koeman's last season. It was easy to see that pace was what we were missing. And you look at us now in the break with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Richarlison, Bernard, even Sigurdsson. It's just incredible the pace that we break forward with. And the end of that first half was pretty much the same story. Richarlison was just completely untouched on that right-hand side. I don't know if I've ever seen him have as much freedom in a game to travel up and down that wing as he did yesterday. And against a team like Arsenal, I think a lot of us would have been surprised by that. Start of the second half, we continued how direct and how sharp we were, coming under a little bit of pressure. Pickford needed for the first time during the game, and he did that for us. You know, ultimately to be a great keeper, and you've heard lots of people say this, is, you know, you might only have 2 saves to make in the game, but you have to make them. And I think that he did that for us yesterday. Obviously, he's coming back from a controversial story in which he never left the sites and the papers for the last few weeks. And the footage, obviously, in social media, just like that Newcastle game, as annoyed as we all are for this to be a subject of conversation after the Newcastle game and what happened and what would have been said to him as a player then, ultimately to come back with a performance like he did against Arsenal and keep us in the game, keep it another clean sheet, is absolutely massive for us. Bernard's touch and composure is just absolutely incredible. He shocks me every game that he gets a full start like this one and this run that the team's been on. That first touch, there was a gif that was going about yesterday of a touch back heel with his not even looking at it. He's just incredible. That first touch is one that we've not seen in quite a while, I don't think, from a player at Everton. Certainly even the last crop of young great players, Duffy obviously had a massive weekend with those 2 goals at Watford. You look at Ross Barkley, how he's doing at Chelsea, or Lukaku coming only in form now in Man United. I don't necessarily think of any of those players having the touch that Bernard has going up that left hand side. His composure absolutely brilliant, and he was a key man. If it wasn't Dominic Calvert-Lewin or maybe even Gomez today, he could easily be man of the match. And on a different day, I think without the performance that Dominic Calvert-Lewin's put in, he would have been man of the match. Defensively too, actually, he comes back. There was a couple of times during the game where he broke the play up for us and then took us forward with the pace that he has. He's been an absolutely brilliant player for us in the last few weeks, I think. Absolutely really important player going forward, but he still puts a shift in defensively. Sigurdsson, I think, was really unlucky not to score. He said how many shots he had on target, maybe not clinical enough, but he's lucky not to make the second goal in that. I thought it's really important how we mentioned how on fire Goodison has been in the last 2 home performances. Anybody that follows Toffee TV regularly, properly, or the right accounts on Twitter, know that this has been a subject of conversation in the last few weeks. When it had been Liverpool and the atmosphere was right, and then against Chelsea again, it's the work of the originals in the Gladys Streets to get the singing going again, to get the banners going again, and ultimately get an atmosphere that I'm livid I haven't been able to experience in the last few weeks. It just looks unbelievable, the way the cameras and the gantries shake, the way the microphones distort. It just gives you a great feeling as an Everton fan watching that. And the results speak for themselves, how important that atmosphere has been. Marco Silva's not minced his words about how much, there's that cliche being the 12th man, but we've seen what difference that atmosphere has made in Goodison. Being able to beat Chelsea, being able to beat Arsenal, being able to take that form of composure on the road to give us a consistency that I don't think I've ever seen an Everton team have. In my lifetime, at least, consistency. It's just absolutely amazing. Atmosphere incredible. And at home performances is turning Everton, it's turning Goodison into a fortress again, which we've not seen in quite a while. Not at all under Marco Silva this season, at least. It's massively important for us. We all said, or at least the originals have said on Twitter, and then talking to Ped and Baz at Toffee TV, how much of an effort they were going to put in for these big teams that we were facing in the last few games. And look what's happened already. Been able to beat Chelsea at home, and we've been able to beat Arsenal at home. Both, maybe not Chelsea, but Arsenal in a good run of form. The favourites going into today's match. If you were watching it live, even Jimmy, favourites of commentators right before the ball's kicked. So it's massive for us, absolutely huge, the atmosphere, and hopefully we can build on that for next season. There's been talk of that already, how the club's going to compromise and trying to get flags and banners. I really hope the original's all the best, and more fan groups like that for younger supporters that are going to have season tickets next year. Just, it's so important for us, and we've seen in these last few games what difference it's made. Just to touch on beating that top 6, and Marco Silva said after the Chelsea game, it's absolutely ridiculous that it's gotten to the point that it has over the last 2 years, 2017 the last time. And for me, I hadn't seen an atmosphere like we've seen in the last few weeks since we played Chelsea. Lukaku scored that goal, Martinez's last season in the FA Cup, and you could feel it in the cameras and the microphones and the commentators in a live game in the same way that you could when you've been watching the last few home games. It made the difference for us. And the statistic I'd seen yesterday is that we'd beaten 2 of the so-called top 6 sides in 3 games. It had taken 44 games up until that point, which is absolutely crazy, absolutely ridiculous. And Marco Silva said not acceptable for a club of our size, standard, and what our fans expect. I just hope that it can continue. It's interesting to see a team far too often putting performances in like this towards the end of the season when we're not necessarily fighting for anything. We could argue that Europa League spot is what they're pushing for. I think fans would be split on how much we really want that. Europe's always a good thing for me. but necessarily if that's what we need going into next season. I have faith in Brandon Silva now, as I think a lot of the fans do after these few games. Really important for Marco Silva's CV this for next season and winning the fans back over that he'd lost and some of the unacceptable performances, as you say, this season. Really massive, really important, and something that I don't think we've seen from necessarily any manager over the last, maybe even in my lifetime. Moyes not necessarily didn't have that against the top six as they were then. Martinez wasn't necessarily able to do it. Certainly not Koeman. Certainly not Allardyce in the last while. So it's massively important for Marco Silva. I think the fans that have backed him in between are really glad for him. I think he's won some fans back over, which is absolutely massive. We go on to Fulham next week, who are already relegated, in a massive game to try and keep up a momentum up. 3 wins in a row, 3 clean sheets. How unusual is that to say as an Everton supporter? And it feels great. It's absolutely amazing to beat seeds, teams like Chelsea and Arsenal. Let me know what you think in the comments below, whether you disagree with me or not. It's good to be back to interviews again, and I will see you next week for the Fulham game.